Hey folks, Joe Valley here. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Quiet Light Podcast. The guest today is Owen McGab Enaohwo. He's from Maryland, and he's got a partner down in Australia, and they've created a company to help people with their processes, whether it's a knowledge base like we've tried to create here at Quiet Light, which is really just a collection of SOPs, or hiring processes for VAs and things of that nature. So as you look out in 2023 and are thinking about scaling up your people and your processes, using this guy's company, or at least the advice he gives on this podcast, will help you with that. I know that we've developed knowledge bases before here at Quiet Light, and because we don't have a systematic process for it, they become dated fairly quickly. Some of the things that Owen talks about in this podcast will help alleviate that and help you get organized so that as you grow and scale both in revenue and in people, you can do it in an organized fashion, which will eventually help you with an exit, whether you're exiting to your partner, friends and relatives, family, things of that nature, or doing a full exit to an outside party. So let's take a listen. This is Owen McGab Enaohwo from SweetProcess. Here we go. Owen, welcome to the Quiet Light Podcast. How are you?
Joe, thanks for having me. I'm good.
It's good to have you here, man. Why don't you give the audience a little bit of background on yourself and your company?
Okay, so I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called SweetProcess. Basically, it's a software that we make it easy for the listeners and entrepreneurs to be able to have a single place online where they can find how is it that we do any recurring task in our company. You want to get one single place where your employees can go find these procedures and processes on how to do work. That's what we make it easy for your listeners to be able to do, and for our customers by providing that software. But if you want, I could give a quick, brief introduction to as to how we even founded the company and how this came about.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so before SweetProcess started in the fourth quarter of 2013, right? And so before that, I used to run an agency that used to provide entrepreneurs here in the US, small to medium-sized business owners, with back office staff, so typically like virtual assistant and stuff like that, to do work for them. And this came about during the period where people had read the books like the 4-Hour Work Week, The World is Flat, and then they realized, the small to medium-sized business owner realized that they too can take the advantage of the whole what's it called, outsourcing. And it wasn't a thing where just limited to the larger companies like the big telecoms and all of that, right? Because before then, that's what they were accustomed to, that the telecoms and all that would go to this company, to these countries, get like hundreds of employees in this, like 100 seats, whatever, to handle their customer support and all that. So that's what they thought. But these books made them understand that, even the small to medium-sized business owners could do this. But then we started getting this kind of customers, and the issues we had with them was that when they would come to us, they came with this preconceived notion that someone from a different country speaking a different language and a different time zone can just magically take over their work and do it the way they want it to be done, just the way they've always done it, without some kind of proper onboarding on education on how the how the work is done, or training on how the work is done. So part of when we got the customers, part of what we had to do was set the expectations correctly. That, hey, in order for us to do the work the way you want it done, there needs to be some form of training. And so what we would do is, back then it was Skype, not Zoom and all these other
Old school
conferencing
stuff.
tool, old school stuff. So we'll meet on Zoom. And then we'll say, okay, what is that specific task that you want to give out to us to do that happens on a recurring basis that you want to start with? They would have a session with us and walk us, showing us their screen and having a conversation on how they do the work. Then after that interview is done, someone else on my team would take that interview and then create like step-by-step procedures, checklists on how the work is done. But here's where we had issues. The issues we had was the tools we were using for the documenting of these procedures. Either they were enterprise level tools built for like process consulting and were hard to use, or we're just basically hacking together a bunch of different document publishing tools just to get this
that's what we do.
In place.
We just hack stuff together. I've got like 45 to 50 bookmarks at least, right? And hoping the rest of the team does as well. And then we've got everything very well unorganized in Google Drive. And when you want to find something, it's a task amongst
So
itself.
you take away my spiel because that's exactly the problem we were facing. And so in my mind, I was like, there has to be a better way for this because this doesn't make sense. And so fast forward, I went on a podcast like I am right now. It's actually called Mixergy, hosted by Andrew Warner.
Yep.
And I was there to teach his listeners how to systematize their operations, document procedures, and stuff like that. Just similar thing I'm going to do on this call. And my co-founder, all the way from Australia, listened to the call, and he literally, his name is Jervis, by the way. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, he's trying to, build this. He has this idea for building this app, similar to the things I was talking about in terms of making it easy for people to document procedures. And he wants to share some feedback with me and get my thoughts." And so, I was open to it. And this was literally a cold email. He emailed me, right? So, we had a conversation on the phone and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, here's the thing. What you're trying to do is something I have issues with, and I actually do day to day for my clients. Instead of just giving you ideas on how to do this, why don't we just go ahead and build this together, right? But here's what I want to do, and he agreed. And so I was like, that's what we should do. Because I'm running into issues where the tools that I actually want to use are kind of enterprise level and hard to use. I don't want to end up being in a situation where we build the same kind of hard to use tools. So why don't we go ahead and interview a bunch of potential customers so we can see what their problem they're having with this whole thing of documenting procedures and having that single place, right? Online, the employees can go find things. And so we can take our findings, figure out, okay, what is the root issues that people are really having, and then try to build a software that, attempts to address the issues in a simpler way. And so we did that. We had over 40 or so interviews. We recorded all that stuff, deduced what the root issues that they were having, and then we went ahead to build the software. So fast forward, now SweetProcess, we have over 2,000 companies using our software. The typical company is between that 20 employees to all the way to 150 plus employees. We have banks using the company, using the software. We have churches and their volunteers using the software. We have government agencies using the software, lawyers. I mean, it runs the gamut because at the end of the day, this issue of, having your employees be able to do work predictably and having information right there in front of the hand to do the work, it's industry agnostic. It's not specific to a specific industry. So that's why we have different industries using the software. So that's just a quick introduction of how SweetProcess got started.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. You're solving a problem. First, it was your client's problem, and you saw it was a problem for everybody else. We're in the same boat, right? At Quiet, we've got 35, 36 employees now, and growing, and doing hiring them on and bringing VAs on in particular. I find always to be challenging because we don't have the process, we don't have the SOPs in place to bring them. First of all, on how to bring them on. Secondly, once they're brought on, is the role that they're going to work in fully documented? And the answer is no, Owen. So how do you encourage your clients through SweetProcess to, properly document things in terms of A, onboarding, B, the work that's going to be done by, let's say a VA? Because I think most of the audience would probably be working with virtual assistants, and onboarding them properly is, a barrier to getting that work done to begin with.
Okay, so let me give you a framework on how to get this done, regardless of your reason of why you're doing it. It might be because you're trying to, grow and scale the company, or you're trying to, succession planning, get, someone else to take over from you, or because you're trying to sell the company because the company gets more valuable because if you have these documents in place, or for training and onboarding purposes to get quick use out of your customers. So based on the reason,
pause right there.
Go ahead.
Pause right there, and don't forget what you're about to say, folks. He just talked about, if you're going to sell your company and how this will increase the value of your company. And I've got to touch on that because it's not a numerical thing, right? It's not seller's discretionary earnings times a multiple because of your processes and your onboarding. But what it does is it instills confidence in buyers. They believe in you as a professional. They believe you've built a business that is going to transfer more successfully and not have lots of road bumps and blocks that you have to get around as a new owner shortly after closing, because you've got everything well processed and documented. And if you unfortunately get hit by a bus or just disappear off the face of the earth, intentionally or not, after closing, doesn't matter. Everything is processed to the T, and it's going to get you more value for your business, either in higher offers or a better deal structure. So had to say it, Owen. I had to say it.
I'm glad you I'm glad you went on that. So so regardless of the reason why you're doing this, so we've agreed that you need to do this. So now the next thing is, where do you start? So before you get started, I would say, evaluate, the work you do on a recurring basis, because we're only documenting the work you do on a recurring basis, right? Not the stuff that you do, once and then you never do it. No, those are like projects you never do over. And so we're only focusing on the things you do over and over again. Let's evaluate like maybe a week or so, a month or whatever, of like a time frame of this work you do on a recurring basis. And then that will give you kind of a list of what is happening in the company, right? And then before you start documenting, I'll say the first thing you need to ask is, which of these recurring tasks are required? The reason why I say required is because some of these things, we just because of tribal knowledge, we've always done things this way, and it's not necessarily required because you might just start by eliminating the things that are not required, so that you can only focus on the recurring things that are required. Because we want to start this documenting thing, and it's an effort. We don't want to document things that are necessary. So now we are left with the recurring tasks that are required. Now let's look at that and say, okay, let's break that into two parts. The tasks that are revenue generating, which are the sales and marketing tasks that bring in your customers, like into the company, and then the other part of that, which is the production tasks, the things that you do to deliver what you've promised to your customers. Right now, people are listening to this and say, "Oh, maybe I should go ahead and start with the with the sales and marketing stuff, because it's exciting. If you document how you do that, because you have a system and you document how you do it, now you can get more employees to bring in more customers." But I'll say pause on that, because you're going to end up having a system that works, documenting how it works, and bringing people to do the work, so they bring in more customers. So these customers get pissed at the fact that on your production side, there's a lot of bottlenecks, right? You don't want to piss more customers off. So that's why I say start with the production side of things first. Now let's determine which task on the production side of things is the biggest bottleneck. And to identify that, it's like the task that anytime it comes up, it's like, oh gosh, information nightmare. Information is missing here and there. Or you really don't like doing it because you feel like, oh, it's taking so much of your time. Or whatever reason it is
you
that you identify.
Remember how to do it each month. That's the problem I have. Is like, okay, this is once a month. It's not a big deal. But at the beginning of every month, I'm like, how did I do this?
How do you do it? And it's even now heightened now that people are not working in the same location. Like back in the days before, COVID made remote working fashionable, right? Everybody's doing it now. You could just rely on maybe walking to your coworker and interrupting them, because that's what you were literally doing, to try to get information from them. And now they have to figure out, okay, what was I doing before this guy came to interrupt me so I can do my work? Now you can't even do that. So everybody's working from home, and keep in mind, a lot of them are parents with kids and all that. So everybody's attention is literally needed to do work. So it's heightened now because people are working from home. So back to the story. So we've identified that, the biggest bottleneck on the production side of things. So how do you get started? I'll say it's the time when you're about to work on the task. That's when you start documenting. Like, because you mentioned, trying to remember how to do the work, right? So when you're actually trying to do the work, obviously you're going to have to try to remember how to do the work. So I say, okay, why don't you also take the time to document a procedure? But here's the thing. I'm not asking you to document an exact video at this point. I'm asking you to document what I fancily call a minimum viable procedure, which is a fancy way of saying a skeleton outline of a checklist. All it has to have there is just a title of the procedure and title of each of the steps. So if you are working on a 10-step task, for instance, by the time you're actually done working on the task, you will have a minimum viable procedure that has title of the task and title of the 10 steps. How do you go from this outline of the procedure to something with more details fleshed in? Where I mean details, I mean screenshots in there, text in between each step, maybe additional like a small video blurb or whatever that gives more insight into what you're doing in each step. How do you get from that outline to that very point? Is, first of all, you have to put in the minds of all your managers and your employees on the ground that, hey, this is going to be a continuous improvement thing. We got to install it in their mind that we're all starting from version 0, and we are going to, as we keep working, we're going to keep improving each version. So now remember, you've documented that outline. The next time your employee, manager, or whatever is about to work on this task, again, they need to have that outline in front of them, right? And their task is, as they're working on the task, all they need to do is just go in there and put in some blurb into each of the steps. Not too much, just something, because we want to go from version 0 to something with more detail. And your job is, once they have done that, is to review that document, the upgrade of it, to make sure that there is some information in there, right? So that every time, that this is the dance, every time you're working on this task, we're going back to that document and trying to add additional information. And you are making sure that you have your eyes on this to make sure that you're improving as you go. So that's the framework. Now you go to
let me ask,
go ahead.
the document itself, What is the format of the document and where does it live?
Okay, this is where we start talking about the actual tool that makes everything all come together. And that's why, I'll talk about SweetProcess. But I'm trying to give you a framework on how to do it regardless of whether, because I don't want to just be an ad for SweetProcess. I want to give them how to do it regardless of SweetProcess or not. So to answer your question, the format could be, I would say, let it be, a document, right? A readable text document that has title of the document and title of each of the steps. And, you want to have images in there, right? I would say don't put a video, a long video, because the problem with videos is that when you have a video that is too long, now you're telling someone that, oh, I'm going to spend the time to watch this entire video to get an understanding of what you want me to do. So if you're going to have to use a video, make the video less than a minute. Be honest, right? Because we want that video to be representative of that very step. So personally, I rather not use videos. I rather use screenshots. And if you need to make the screenshot a visual where people can see things, then use a GIF. A GIF will show you some kind of animation, right? So screenshots and text, because when you make changes, it's just a P out, paste the new stuff versus trying to use a video. Video, you have to render a whole new video. So back to the thing now. So you've identified that first document, you've gone through that dance, you've created that procedure for that first document. So every time employees are working on tasks, their job is to improve the document, you go there and approve it. Now you identify the next biggest bottleneck on the production side of things, you do the same thing we mentioned. Identify the next biggest bottleneck. And so, eventually you have documented quite a lot of the task on the production side. Then you can start freeing up some time to say, okay, let me start looking at the sales and marketing stuff, the stuff that bring in customers into the company. You start documenting how you do those things as well. And here's the thing, you now get to a point where you can start bringing on new employees to do those tasks, knowing that on the operation side of things, you won't run into a bottleneck because you've documented how, to a larger extent, the production side of things are done. And if you need to bring in new employees to take over some of those things, they have a starting point that they can go from. So now the next thing is you understand how to make this done. How do we also have this culture in the company that people have this system thinking mindset? So I'll give you some tips on how to do that. The first thing is if your employees come and asking how to do a certain thing, you have to make sure that you always tell them, hey, have you checked SweetProcess? For instance, if you're using SweetProcess, they know the first thing your manager or anybody who they keep coming to ask questions, have you checked SweetProcess? And what that does to them subconsciously is like, hey, I can't go ask my boss, I can't go ask my manager how to do something until I have checked SweetProcess, right? For instance. And now they know that every time they have a question, the first thing they have to do is go and check that software that you're using and see if that document is in there. Now, you're trying to train and habit. Now, what also happens is that eventually there's going to come a time where they check SweetProcess, for instance, and they don't see that document. Now, that should trigger something where you, the manager, or you, the owner of the company, knows now that this is some information that is critical for your employees to have. You train them that every time they need to find something, they need to go and check that SweetProcess, for instance. But now this document is not there. That should now trigger the opportunity for you to go ahead and document a new minimum viable procedure for that task, especially because it's something that you're going to do on a recurring basis. Another way to also encourage the whole thing of habits into your employees, right, for this whole system thinking is, as your employees start, checking the SweetProcess, seeing how the documents are all documented for all the different tasks, they're going to start seeing, every document, an employee's name is next to a document that maybe they created it, or they were the ones that added this step to the document, or they're the ones that added comments to it. So what does that put in their mind? Like, well, all my colleagues are here helping to improve and create documents of how we work. Maybe I should start joining in this dance too, because I don't want it to be like I'm not contributing to this company, right? They start doing that. But now, from the mindset of the employees, you also let them know that from a culture standpoint, where will you say that the company has your best interest, other than the fact that, okay, you are doing the work and we are encouraging you to come here and make updates to how you do the work. This is a company that actually listens to you, and we care so much about you that we want you to be part of improving how you do the work. So this is ways to sell it to them. Now, people might say, okay, well, your employees have things to do. Maybe they might not have the time. So let me give you some tips on how to add additional ways for them to do the work. Well, incentivize them. They're getting paid to do work, and now you're asking them to, invest some time to actually help you document and improve your procedures and processes, why not also pay them for doing this, right? So you can actually pay them to do this. Another thing you can also do is that maybe you can kind of shortcut some of these things. You can maybe create a procedure on how to create procedures so that all they have to do is copy that document, right? That template document, and that kind of gives them instructions on, or whenever you're creating a procedure, this is how you want the procedure to be. This is how I want the title to be. This is how I want you to have steps in there. This is how I want you to have details in there. So I'm just giving the listeners tips on how to do it. But if you say for some reason that, okay, all these tips is not enough for you to do something, to get this started. Well, they are process consultants, people who are hired, third parties who are hired to come into a company to help you document procedures. They come in and follow this whole dance that I've mentioned, and they can use a software like SweetProcess to actually help you get it done in your company. Now, the thing is, obviously, if you're hiring a process consultant, it's going to be more expensive than if you're trying to do it with yourself and with your employees, but at least you have all the options available to get this done.
One of the challenges I have is creating, a place where it's properly labeled. So if somebody is searching for, an email launch, sequence, how do I do that? Or, to change the list price of a business, how do I do that? How do you organize, SOPs by employees or by departments and things of that nature? How deep do you go?
So I can talk from our standpoint of SweetProcess. So what we do is we allow you to create teams, right, on how your company runs. So if you have the sales, your marketing, your finance, create your different teams. And within those teams, obviously you have roles in those teams as well, right? So let's imagine, let's say you're running a restaurant and you have a kitchen, right? And in that kitchen, you have a role where chefs, right? So you can put a role for chefs and people who are in that role. And then a role for dishwashers and people who are in that role, right? And so now back to the teams is that, you put documents into those teams, and those people who are part of those teams can only see documents in that team. They can't see documents outside of that team. And then you can even further organize the documents within each team by putting those documents in relevant folders. One of the things that we did to make sure that is that SweetProcess, from the standpoint of searchability, is a universal search, meaning that if you wanted to search for a document, all you literally have to do is think of a specific keyword that should be contained in that document. Let's say if you're looking for, you're writing a procedure on how to refund orders, right? And you're looking for how to do that. All you would do is just type the keyword refund, and SweetProcess will bring out a result of every single document that has that keyword refund, either in the title or in the content. And it's now easier for you to now say, okay, from this result, I can see what I'm looking for.
Yeah, right? This is the problem we had here at Quietly, where searching for keywords in the title or document inside of Google Drive searched, I think, our entire Google Drive instead of the specific folders that we were trying to create. And funny enough, we used to have what we called it a knowledge base, and we used to have it as a separate URL accessible only by our team on our WordPress site. And I swear, every time I needed to upload a new video or training sequence or whatever it might be, I had to relearn it every single time. I didn't have an SOP on it because I thought, no big deal. I'm getting this. I know how to do this month. And, you do so many things in a month as an entrepreneur that you quickly forget tasks like that. And eventually the knowledge base, which really is just SOP documentation, it became dated very quickly. We're in the middle of trying to rebuild it. And I know Mark, my business partner, is doing it because I did it last time and it didn't, it's just a monumental task. And honestly, I don't think we've looked at SweetProcess. So this is going to be one of the first things I have him do once we're done with this recording. So I appreciate it. What other tips can you give to help people just get started? Even if, again, they're not, this isn't an ad for SweetProcess, but if they're not using SweetProcess and they're just trying to get started and they've only got, it's them and a partner and 3 or 4 VAs, and they're hoping to add additional VAs in the coming year. What tips can you give them to just start to get organized?
So here's the thing too, is that I've given you a lot of tips and the framework, but I also said if you can't do it or your employers can't do it, you can hire a process consultant. Now, also a process consultant is looking at it from a standpoint of consultant, but maybe if that's too expensive, there are actual people who their jobs literally call them standard SOP writers. You can go on what's it called on the LinkedIn and do like a title search, right? And hire these people, and these people are literally hired in companies to write SOPs. Now, obviously, these guys don't come with the aspect of consulting like a process consultant will come with. So it's more of a handheld thing where you have to, kind of give them way more information, and their job is to go there and try to write this stuff. So that's another option that you can throw in there. But if you go with the process consultant route, they come from a much higher level where they're actually kind of consulting and going through trying to help you think through things, and then eventually sometimes they actually end up having SOP writers that they hire internally to do the actual writing of this document for you. There's something you mentioned earlier where it's like you said, you have to spend time trying to remember how the work is done, right? And so now this is interrupting the fact that you don't get to do the work you need to do when you need to do it. You have to spend time trying to remember how the work is done. But I'll also argue that if you have all these procedures in place, you don't have to spend any energy trying to remember how work is done. As a matter of fact, because you don't have to spend any time trying to remember how the work is done, because you can just quickly get started on the work, that also allows that innovation to come in. Because when you start doing the work, you start thinking, how can I make this better? That's what your mind starts going to, because your mind is free from thinking, how do I do the work? Your mind just goes straight to doing the work. So you're now allowed to start thinking, and not only you, but you and your employees, because you have these SOPs in place. Your employees start yourself too, start thinking, how can we improve stuff? And that to me is innovation, the whole continuous improving of how your work is done. And that only comes in when you actually have that starting point. And the starting point is the documents in place.
Yeah. My last company that I sold, it was me and one, remote employee. And one of the recommendations I got from Mark here at Quiet Light when I was selling my business before I was a partner with him was creating SOPs for tasks I did every day. It was easy because it was just me. And I knew who I was writing it for. I was writing it for the new owners of the business. And it became very valuable and helped me get, a full price, all cash offer. I think the challenge sometimes, Owen, is when we are so busy doing all the things that we do and an eventual exit is someday down the road, that's not motivation enough to write the SOPs. But what you just mentioned is it helps you continually improve your business, and waste, eliminates wasted time, and gives more confidence to people, and they can continually improve the process that they're working on. They can do, more in less time. And that in itself is an improvement of the business. People will be happier and the value of the business goes up as well. Or you just might end up making more money because you're doing a better job at these organizational tasks. So there's lots of reasons to do it now versus for someday for an exit, wouldn't you say?
Of course. And one final point is, a lot of this documentation we're documenting is so that human beings can do the work predictably the way we want it. But that shouldn't be the end goal. That shouldn't be where you stop. We should also think that, okay, as we keep improving this stuff, maybe we get to a point where we can start figuring out ways to actually start automating some of these things, where some of the points in the task that we've documented procedure, maybe we don't even need to have human beings do it. We can then start using software and machines doing it, so that, we go from 100% being done by human beings, we get to certain points where we start having automation. So that's kind of the dance of how you're doing this. Is that, sometimes you can get to that point where a lot of the stuff, human beings don't have to do. You can automate it, and now that's, totally out of your hand. But you don't get to that automation until you've gotten a full understanding of how the manual things get done. You start from the documenting of the SOPs and eventually get to the point where maybe the entire thing is automated, or some parts of it, or a large extent of it is automated, and some other parts are done by human beings.
That's awesome. The thing I like most is the fact that you have a document showing you this is the framework on how to create an SOP. And then the rest of your team uses that. So they're similar, right? Anytime you go to a new SOP, it looks familiar. You don't have to learn it from scratch. It's great. And I just, I took a light look at your site again, and I got to admit, I mean, I'm thinking about this for Quiet Light, I want to be honest with you. It's ridiculously affordable. It really is.
Yep, that's a thing people keep saying all the time. I'm beginning to wonder maybe we should increase the price.
No, wait until after we sign up. How do people learn more about SweetProcess, Owen? How do they reach you? How do they, get started if they want to take a look and see if it's a good fit for them?
So great. So what I want to do is, because the listeners will listen to all the way to this point, I want to give them an incentive. So if you go to our website, by default, the trial is 14 days. Because you've listened to this interview all the way to this point, I want to give you an extended trial. So instead of 14 days, you get 28 days. So a longer time to try the software, use it for free. And to get this offer, you go to sweetprocess.com/quiet light. Again, as sweet like candy, process.com/quiet light, and you'll be able to get access to this extended trial of SweetProcess.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast today, Owen. Greatly appreciate it. Hopefully people will take you up on the offer and have a great 2023.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thanks for having me. And to the audience, thanks for listening to me.